Welcome to TaNaCh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Torah Talk Weekly Parsha. This week, moving on to BaMidbar. Numbers, chapter 1 through chapter 4, verse 20-ish, I think is what it is. And if I'm right, I'm right. And if I'm not, then that's just too doggone good and bad at the same time. Rabbi, welcome back.
Thank you so much. Did you say that this week's portion is Numbers 4?
No, Numbers 1 through chapter 4, verse 20, I think it is.
Oh, that could be. I don't know the ending verse offhand, but
that is okay.
We're starting at the beginning of the book.
Yes, very, very true. Yes, sir. Awesome. Well, it's glad to have you back as usual. It seems like it was just yesterday, even though it was not, apparently. But we're glad to have you back.
Okay, great to be back. So number one, I'm so happy that you had my friend Rabbi Uri last week.
He did great. I
thought his class was phenomenal. I just loved it. He had a great time. So, God willing, he'll have other opportunities to join you. And so what I realized last week, he covered a double portion. Last week we had a double portion, double Parsha, like we explained. The last two Parshiot, the last two portions of the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, which were Bahar and Bechukotai. And it reminded me that the first week, William, that you and I did this series together was last year, Bechukotai.
It sure was. It sure was. We have made it a full year cycle plus one. Nice.
Right.
And so now...
a full year cycle. And so we're starting now our second go-around of BaMidbar. We did one last year, and I encourage people to go back and watch that class to hear what we said then. Maybe I'll do a quick recap, but not a lot.
Which brings up a question.
Item number one.
Which brings up a question people ask me. So, when you get finished with the year cycle, are we going to stop this show and go on and have another show? And the answer is no. This thing will go on as long as we can keep Rabbi on 3, 4, 10 years from now. Because every year, each cycle, you really only have enough time to really talk about one or 2 points when there's tons of stuff to talk about. So really, it would take a lifetime of continuous study to really just milk it for everything we can get out of it. So my goal is to keep this thing going. We may have, 10 years from now, we'll have 10 different portions on BaMidbar, so that's kind of how we're going to roll with this. So,
right. You never know how it's going to go. Everything with Hashem's help, maybe you'll have other speakers who'll be able to contribute their perspectives, because right now you're only hearing one perspective, and Torah is so infinite that it really pays to hear other perspectives. Now, and it's great that we had a chance to hear from Rabbi Komornik many times in the last year. We heard once from my friend Rabbi David Fredman, and last week from Rabbi Uri. So,
and we also have,
hopefully there'll be a
for the new
continuing
viewers
of rotation
for the new viewers. And of course, we've got Parshat in the past as well that we've done from 2015, 2016, from different rabbis as well. So combined total, I think we have maybe 7 or 8 of y'all but you and Kormornik and what was the first one? Was it Moshe?
Moshe Kormornik.
I mean,
he's my usual sub.
I apologize for forgetting the name, but
there was a fellow Rabbi David Fredman who did one.
That was great. So all the people you brought to the channel are really you're just wonderful to listen to. So we appreciate that very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. One other announcement that I want to make, we'll have to figure out what we'll do about this, if anything, is next week. Next week is the holiday of Shavuot. It'll be 7 weeks post Passover, and as we spoke about last week, right? So we're going to celebrate the festival Shavuot, which occurs on a Thursday night. So it's Thursday night to Friday night. But outside of Israel, for reasons that I wasn't going to go into, there is an additional day. All the festivals that are mentioned in the Torah in the diaspora are celebrated for an additional day for somewhat of complicated reasons. So here in the United States and anywhere else that's not in Israel, the festival Shavuot will begin Thursday night and end Saturday night. And because of that, on Shabbat itself, we will not read a Parsha of the week that week. We will rather read a specific reading for the festival of Shavuot. However, in the land of Israel, when the festival will be over Friday night. Shavuot will be Thursday night to Friday night. So Friday night will be a regular Shabbat, and they will read the regular portion for that week. So that means next week's Parsha, this week is BaMidbar. Next week is Naso. In the United States and other diaspora communities, we will not read Naso. In Israel, they will read Naso. And the following week, in the diaspora, we'll read Naso. And in Israel, they'll read Baha'alotecha. So we're going to, because of the schedule of Shavuot, the diaspora communities and the community of Israel will be off 1 week from each other in the weekly Parsha. They will come back into sync later when basically in Israel they'll split up what would otherwise be a double Parsha over 2 weeks. So it kind of slows down their progress. And we will join two together and we'll catch up with them. But that's not until later. So it's going to create two issues. Issue number one, next week, technically there's no Parsha. For us in the diaspora, the Parsha won't be read till the week following. So we have to figure out, are we going to do a Parsha class next week for two Parshas later and then skip the following week? Will we skip next week and do it the following week, for that portion? Will we do two Parsha classes on the same portion, 1 week after the other? We'll have to figure that out in terms of scheduling, because again, here in the diaspora communities, we're not actually reading a Parsha next Shabbat. This Shabbat we're reading BaMidbar. Next Shabbat we're skipping because of Shavuot, and we'll only read Naso till the next one. Again, while in Israel, they will read Naso next Shabbat. So, William, that's a scheduling issue.
That's great to clear that up, because honestly, I never knew. I knew they had the diaspora had 2 days and such. I never knew that there was what would you call an unaligning, I guess, of the Parsha, though. That's kind of cool. I'm glad you actually mentioned
it happens in the event that the extra day of the festival, which is celebrated in the diaspora, falls out on Shabbat.
Got it.
So then in Israel, it'll be a regular Shabbat with a regular reading, and in the diaspora, it won't be. So it gets off by one, but we fix it with a double Parsha later. One community will read double and one community will not, and then we'll come back into sync.
Perfect.
So I just thought that was a matter of interest.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I was thinking about it this week, just bringing it up. Okay, fine. So here we are in our second go-around with BaMidbar.
Take it
Last
away.
time, I actually had pre-recorded this class because I had my daughter's graduation or something, I think. Yeah. And so what I spoke about then was the idea of the beginnings of each of the books of the Torah. I'm not going to rehash the class, but I'll give you the bigger idea, is that the beginning of each of the books of the Torah emphasizes the relationship between God and the people of Israel, is emphasized at the beginning of each of the books, even the book of Genesis. And we spoke a little about that even last week. But everyone should check that out if they want to rehash that idea. There was a lot said. It was very interesting, but it was a relatively short class. I pre-recorded it about 40 minutes, I think it was. Okay, so this year, go around, I want to focus on verse 2. Before we get there, let's just talk about the name of the book, BaMidbar, in the desert. And because the book begins with it says, this is in BaMidbar Sinai. This is what God spoke to Moshe in Midbar Sinai, in the desert of Sinai, the Sinai desert, or the wilderness of Sinai, if you will. And so we take from that first verse the word BaMidbar, and we sort of feature it as the title of not only the whole book, but also the first Parsha. However, in English, it's called the Book of Numbers. And it wasn't made up by English-speaking people. Where does that come from? I'm sure it comes from something in Latin or Greek, who knows? However, it actually even further comes from something in Hebrew. There are I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again. There are alternative names for the Hebrew books of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, other than the way they're colloquially known. We call the book of Bereshit is Genesis, but really it's called by another name Sefer Yetzirah, which means the book of creation or the book of formation, essentially Genesis. That name Genesis comes from the Hebrew name Sefer Yetzirah, which predates it. We have the book of Exodus, which in Hebrew is called Shemot, which means names, right? Bereshit, Genesis, Bereshit means in the beginning. Shemot means names. These are the names of the children of Israel. But there's another name for it, which is Sefer HaGeula, the book of redemption, because it chronicles the story of the Jews' redemption from Egypt. So Exodus, right? The redemption from Egypt, leaving Egypt, Exodus. The third book is called Vayikra, from the words in the verse, which means, and he called, because God called to Moses. But the other alternative Hebrew name for it is Sefer Torah Kohanim, the Torah of the priests, if you will, or the Levitical laws, being that the priestly family was from the tribe of Levi. They were Levitical. So it's Torah Kohanim, the Levitical Torah, the Levitical law, or the Levitical book, hence Leviticus, right? And this book is called Sefer HaPikudim. Aside from being called BaMidbar, it's also called Sefer HaPikudim, which literally means the book of countings or the book of numbers, right? Because this book is filled with many countings. Just go ahead and read this portion alone. You'll see how many countings there are. There's the counting of each tribe, and then there's the counting of the whole people together, and then there's the counting of each camp. The Israelites are commanded to encamp around the tabernacle on 4 sides. So each side had 3 tribes. So it counts the number of each camp, and then again inclusively the whole camp, and it counts the Levites from 30 days and upward, and so on and so forth. A lot of countings, and that's just in this parsha, but there's more countings even yet to come in later parshas. So a lot of countings, a lot of numbers. So it's called, even in Hebrew, Sefer HaPikudim. And Divarim, the last of the books, which is called Divarim, from the opening words in the book. These are the words, Divarim, these are the words of Moses. So Divarim is also called, alternatively, Mishneh Torah. Mishneh Torah literally means a doubling of the Torah or a repetition of the Torah. Hence, because there's a lot of review, as we spoke about in our class on that Parsha, there's a lot of review of previous topics. So in the book of Devarim, so it's called Deuteronomy, whatever exactly that means in Greek, Latin, I don't know what language, but clearly from the word like duet, deuce means 2, right? Duo, it's the second Torah, as it were. It's the repetition. So all of those English names really derive from earlier Hebrew names that just, they fell out of popularity. Nobody calls it that. If you went up to most Jews and you said, are you reading Sefer Yetzirah? They wouldn't know you're talking about Genesis. You have to say Bereshis. Sefer Yetzirah now is more popularly known as the Kabbalistic work, the book of creation, because it talks about the Kabbalistic secrets of creation, but that's neither here nor there. If you said Sefer Geula, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. Torah Kohanim may be the book of the priests. They might know you mean Leviticus, but it's also the name of a midrash, a rabbinic analysis of the book of Leviticus is called Torah Kohanim. So many people might confuse it for that. If you said Sefer HaPikudim, I don't think people would know you're talking about the book of Numbers, most people. And if you said Mishneh Torah, they would not realize you're talking about the book of Deuteronomy. They would think you're talking about the Maimonides work. Maimonides wrote a work of Jewish law called Mishneh Torah, the second Torah, as it were, because it contains all the Torah's laws in a codified form for practical legal application. So he named it Mishneh Torah. He borrowed that name for his own book. So those names are not popularly known anymore. So you won't have too much luck with them. But I'm telling you that because it is somewhat significant when we discuss the book of Numbers. Okay, and we'll see why. But I want to focus first on maybe I'll say one thing before I go into my main topic. It's called the BaMidbar also, in the desert, for a reason, because it starts and it introduces that these are the words that Hashem spoke to Moshe in the desert. And we always have to ask, like, why is it significant that I need to know, like Rabbi Uri talked last week, it said, this was commanded on Mount Sinai. Okay, everything wasn't all of the law from Mount Sinai. Why do we have to specify in the beginning of this portion that this was commanded on Mount Sinai? So go to Rabbi Uri's class for that answer. But we also ask, God spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, and he said, do I really need to know the location of where this took place? Why is the location significant? So, in other words, the Torah is not a history book. It's not here to just tell me stories. Every word of Torah is significant. A lot of things are recorded in writing, and a lot of things are not. Certain things are left out very intentionally, and certain things are put in very intentionally. Every word, every letter of Torah is divine. It's intentional. So what's the intention of that? There's a significance to knowing it was in the desert of Sinai. So there's a lot there. But one of the things I want to say, it's a famous teaching. It says that just like a desert is a place of emptiness and ownerlessness, hefker in Hebrew. It says a person needs, in order to receive the Torah, it's the wilderness of Sinai, right? Sinai, the mountain where the Torah was given. In order to be a recipient for Torah, you need to empty yourself out like a desert, like a midbar, like a wilderness. You need to empty yourself out of all your previous knowledge, of all your previous biases, your previous prejudices, your previous ideologies that came to you from whether it's the secular society around you or from the religious upbringing that you had in a different faith, in a different spiritual system. In order to be a recipient for the Torah, you have to say, you know what? All that's nothing. I'm doing a big dump. I'm dumping that out and I'm putting in the Torah. Clear, fresh start. We need to take our instructions purely from Hashem, from the Almighty, and not from any other source. So we start off and we say, I make myself like a desert of Sinai, so to speak. I want to be able to receive it fresh. Now you'll ask, what do you mean? How can I do that? How can I do that? I already have the foundations that I have, and that's certainly true. You can't take a rubber eraser and stick it in your brain and erase things. So I heard from one of my teachers, he said a line from Sherlock Holmes. Going off on a tangent. What else is new? He said a line from Sherlock Holmes that Watson tells Sherlock Holmes about the fact that the earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around. And Sherlock Holmes didn't know that. And it's quite surprising. Seems a very basic fact that the earth goes around the sun. Now, of course, at a certain period in history, we believed that the sun went around the earth. But later, astronomers disproved it. Copernicus disproved it. And so it became accepted scientific fact only later. And apparently, for whatever reason, in the education of Sherlock Holmes, he never advanced from the earlier belief of the Earth-centric system to the updated belief or knowledge of the sun-centric solar system. And so when Watson tells him this, Sherlock Holmes responds to him with something like, thank you, my good man, for telling me that. I shall now proceed to forget it as quickly as I can. And Watson says, why would you want to forget something like that? And he says, it's of absolutely no relevance to the work that I do. And I spend my days filling my head with knowledge that'll help me to solve mysteries and to solve crimes. That's what I put in my brain. And those are the memories that I save, the information that's relevant. And every bit of irrelevant information is taking up space in my brain that could otherwise be used for useful facts that can allow me to be successful in what I need to do in this world. So thank you for that fact, but I don't want it. I'm going to promptly try to forget it. So my Rebbe, his name is Rabbi David Kaplan, he said the same thing with Torah. You have to put in as much Torah information as you can so that it will push out every Torah tidbit that you put in that limited space in your brain is going to push out something on the other end that went in before, hopefully something you don't need. Just keep filling your brain with Torah information, with divine information, with messages from the Almighty that he communicated to us through his holy scriptures. And one by one, you'll get rid of all the nonsense. But if you come in with the intention of, I want to make myself a desert. I want to make myself empty and ownerless, and I'm going to fill it with divine knowledge from Hashem, and that he should be my master and no one else. That's a good way to start. I think it's a good way to go into the book of BaMidbar. Anyway, now let's look at verse 2. So in verse 2, it says as follows. It says, I'll say the Hebrew and then the English. It says, Se'u et rosh kol adat b'nei Yisrael. Now, already the words are difficult. William, if you're with me, I want to ask you a question. So chime in and let me know you can hear me.
Go right ahead.
You have probably in front of you a translation or accessible translation.
I do. I've got the Hebrew on the screen right now. I can switch it right over and tell you this is the
What is
Chabad
the
Hebrew.
translation of these first few words? Se'u et rosh kol adat b'nei Yisrael. How does it translate it?
Take the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel.
Okay. Take the sum. Now, Se'u does not mean take, and Rosh does not mean sum, okay? Se'u et Rosh, take the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel. It neither means take nor sum.
It'll lift up the heads or something like that, right?
Oh, very good. Se'u means lift up,
Nice.
okay? And Rosh means a head. Lift up the head, or a head, of all of the nation of Israel. Now you could say to lift up is to take up, it's to take it. But even when you say take a sum, you're not taking anything. You're not picking anything up. You know, so we take account, make account, take a head count. We're borrowing the word take, but it's not literally to take. We're just counting. But what's interesting is the translation is correct in as much as it's a euphemistic phrase. So this euphemistic phrase of lift up the head means take account of the heads, therefore the amount, the sum of the congregation of Israel. But again, of course, a translator is a trader, as they say, and every translation is a commentary. You're already losing the meaning of the words when you read the commentary. Se'u et rosh, take the sum. No. It means lift up the head, and it's a euphemism for counting or taking the sum. So we need to ask the number of questions on this verse. But let's just read on a little bit, okay? Lemishpachotam leveit avotam. Now you'll notice that I'm pronouncing more in the Sephardic pronunciation rather than the Ashkenazic pronunciation. Last week I would have said Se'u rosh kol adas b'nei Israel, not adat b'nei Israel. Lemishpachosam leveis avosam, with a pronounce it with an S sound instead of a T. That's a difference between the Ashkenazic or Eastern European communities versus the Sephardic or Spanish communities, which were exiled to North Africa, the Middle East. Whether that's an S sound or a T sound, most likely it's more like the Yemenites, which make it more like a TH sound, a th sound. But be it as it may, each community has a tradition. And the reason I'm pointing it out is because I was reading some of the comments last week. And people were like, why is he saying it like that? I can't understand what he's saying. So it's like, I feel bad. A lot of people know modern Hebrew in Israel today. In modern Hebrew, they use the so-called Havara Sepharadit, the Sephardic pronunciation, where they pronounce this letter as a t sound rather than a s sound. So I decided to shift my pronunciation to make it a little more familiar for most people. So I want to point that out. I'm doing that intentionally for you guys, okay? I'm doing it for you. Lemishpachotam leveit avotam, according to their families, according to their fathers' houses, bimispar shemot, according to the number of the names. Now, William, what is the translation in English of the words bimispar shemot? I said my translation. Is it different in the English version?
Let's see, of the names. Let's see, families following their families' houses, a head count of every male.
Before the head count of every male.
Okay, so that's what I thought. So by families following their fathers' houses.
And then what's after their fathers' houses?
A head count of every male according to the number of their names.
Oh, according to the number of their names. Okay, they flipped the order of the words.
That's what I thought about the Shemot was
according
names.
to the number of their names.
Right.
Kol Zachar, every male, Gulgolotam, according to their...
Oh, I didn't hear
Gulgolet is a skull, according to their head count. Okay.
Yep,
so it says according to the number of their names. It's a very strange phrase. So here's a summary of the questions that I want to propose here. Number one, you should all be scratching your head. Why does God Almighty command that the Jews be counted. This is an omniscient being, that means all-knowing. Certainly he knows how many Jews they are. Certainly he could just say, hey, Moses, there are 603,550, if I got the number right, Jewish males between the age of 20 and 60 are eligible to serve in the military, right? Why ask for this count? Like, hey, Moses, I got to know how many there are. Do me a favor. Could you count them for me?
Especially whenever God doesn't like his people being counted.
Oh, so we learned, as you recall, that he doesn't want the people being counted. And that's why, as you might recall, they're told to contribute coins.
So they can count the coins.
Even though it's not stated here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In the context of the larger Torah, which we must know, please, people don't even realize how big what the word context means. Right. Obviously reading a phrase out of context or a verse out of context of the chapter is one level of taking things out of context, but you have to read a chapter in the context of chapters that surround it. And you need to read that in the context of the entire book, and you need to read that book in the context of the entire TaNaCh. So I did a deep dive on this in Parshat Beshalach, where we showed that you really need the context of the whole TaNaCh to understand even one verse. And it drives me crazy how much people twist. I'm not even talking about Christians. I'm talking about even former Christians who rejected the New Testament and Christianity because they know the games that they're playing, and they say, "Oh, I'm done with the lies of the church." And then they go and they create their own set of lies. I'm sorry to say, I'm sure they're well-intentioned, because they read the TaNaCh their way, and they come out with their own conclusions, and they basically create out of whole cloth a whole new religious belief system and spiritual system and legal system that, as we say in Hebrew, lo haya v'lo nivra, it never was, and it was never created, such a thing. And they make this claim that, oh, this is what God really wants. And it's funny, if God really wanted that, then nobody figured it out until you just now, which is preposterous. But a lot of the errors, the rookie errors that these people make, is that they think they're reading in a context, but they're forgetting about the larger context of. So you read right here, you would think that they actually counted the individual people, but we know they didn't, because you have to go all the way back to the book of Exodus, back in Shemot, where the Jews are told to bring half shekel coins. That doesn't mean half a coin. It means a coin, the weight of 1/2 of a shekel, which is a measure of weight. And the coins were counted. And that's surely what's happening here. But you wouldn't know it from this verse. You have to know it by knowing multiple books of the Torah and knowing the laws of counting. You're not supposed to count. And I want to talk about why. Maybe I'll throw it out there so we'll circle back to it. But the reason is we're not supposed to count individual people. We count rather objects in their place, is because there's a concept called ayin hara, which is known as the evil eye. Some people think this is a superstition. And I would say that the way that it is often used is superstitious and incorrect. And if you wear some kind of a red bendel, they have the red bendel, the red bracelet, somehow it's going to protect you. Nonsense, pagan nonsense. The concept of the evil eye is one that I want to go into. And now that we brought it up, I wonder if I should already address it right here and now. But there's an idea, I'll throw just a small idea of what it is now. The idea of the evil eye is, a person, when they need to, so to speak, fear the evil eye, you'll see it in context of, like, don't show off your wealth, don't dress in a very ostentatious manner, don't drive an ostentatious car, don't live in an ostentatious house. Why? Because it brings upon you the evil eye, the ayin hara, the evil eye, and somehow that causes you to lose what you have. You're going to lose your wealth, you're going to lose your things if you are, like, show-offy. And the explanation of that, the reason for that, as I've come to understand from my studies and what I've learned from my teachers, is there are people in this world, some have more and some have less. When a person who has a good situation is boastful about it and pushes it in front of the eyes of others in a way that is hurtful to their emotions. They see it and they feel a hurt of, I'm reminded how little I have. I'm reminded how bad my situation is. You're causing pain to those people. The eyes of those people are reacting and are bringing pain and suffering into the world. So God says, if you, by showing this to the eyes of people, are doing so in such a way that brings pain and suffering to others, that you show off what you have and cause other people's jealousy and pain, then I take that away from you, because I want to take away the source of pain. Don't use what you have as a source of pain for others. There's many examples of this in the Torah, and that's what's known as the evil eye. It's the eye that looks upon a thing and reacts in a damaged or pained way, that God says, I must remove the source of the pain, and the object being looked upon is harmed by that look. That's what it means, the evil eye. So the counting of the Jews, the sort of revelation of their numbers in a direct way, directly onto the people, will cause harm to the people. However, when we direct that look onto something else, even though it alludes to the numbers of the people, but we're actually counting the numbers of the coins. So what that does is that it averts the ayin hara, it averts the evil eye, and the damage isn't caused by the people directly, and therefore they are not damaged in return. The numbers are upon coins and not people. It mitigates the damage that's done by this appearance of largesse, and therefore limits the damage that is reciprocated onto that object of largesse. So we're not supposed to count Jews. Therefore, what we do is we count coins. Yet, and it makes the question even stronger. It says according to the number of their names. So it sounds like we're counting names, right? And wouldn't that be individuals? So let's see if we can solve that problem. So number one, why does God need a census? Number two, if God needs a census, we're not supposed to count people, right? So what are we doing over here? All right, I gave away the counting coins. Yeah, but it says the number of the names. And number two is, why even say the number of the names? It already says every male according to his gulgoles, which we translate it as head count, but a gulgolet is literally a skull. According to their heads, sit with rosh, uplift the head. And why does it? Which it's like a head count, right? Why does it phrase it as lifting the head? Why is that the euphemism for counting? Okay, so we have all these questions. Why a census? Why does it say lift the head? Why does it say according to the number of their names? Okay, so if you paid attention to the last class on BaMidbar, which was all about beginnings, we did address the question of why does God, so to speak, need a census? And the answer was God, of course, does not need a census. The reason God makes a census, and this relates to that theme I mentioned in the beginning of the class, that the opening of every book is a statement of the love between God and the people of Israel, is that something that someone loves, he counts it over and over, like a person, if he's in love with his money. So what does he do? He might know how much money is in his bank account, but he might like to keep looking at his accounts. Ooh, I got so much money. Woo-hoo. He might like to take a stack of bills and go 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600. Woohoo! It gives him so much pleasure to count those dollar bills because it's a reminder of how rich he is. You think of Scrooge McDuck and he's swimming through his vault of coins, right? Which, by the way, doesn't work in real life. Don't ever try jumping off a diving board into a pile of coins. You'll hurt yourself. But it's the love of the money that, I just want to experience that abundance over and over. So the idea that God loves Israel, therefore he counts them again and again. He counts them at the end of the book of Genesis, and in the beginning of the book of Exodus, and then he counts them in the book of Numbers again and again, and he counts them this way and he counts them that way. I spoke about it a lot in that class. It's an expression of the love to the Jewish people, that God's saying, you know what? I love you so much. I get so much joy just from counting you, because it's a reminder of the fact that I have you. But more so, there's another meaning, there's another depth to that, which I really want to explore, which goes to answer some of the other questions. Why is it called lifting up the head? And why is it called according to the number of their names? And the idea is, when we count someone, there is a risk, there is a danger that we make a person insignificant, that we transform a person from an individual, from a human being, into a number. He loses his individuality. He becomes a statistic. He becomes a little jot on a piece of paper. He's just encompassed in that number, 603,550. He's just in there somewhere. There's not even a one for him. It's just he loses his significance. And we know the idea of, in English even, they say like, oh, I'm not a name, I'm just a number. When a person feels like he's just a number and he's not a name and he doesn't count and no one's paying attention to him and he doesn't matter, it's degrading, it's dejecting, it's hurtful, it's depressing. So God is enjoining Moshe, when you count, make sure you don't reduce people to numbers. Se'u et rosh. You don't depress them, you don't degrade them, you don't push them down, you uplift them. You have to make sure when you count the people of Israel that you do it in a way that's uplifting. Se'u et rosh. Lift up the head of all the people of Israel. Why not the heads? The heads, it's multiple. Why the head? Because you have to acknowledge every individual. I'm counting you. I'm counting your individual self. You matter. Every person has to be made to feel like he matters, even when he's being counted among the multitude. And that's why it says according to the number of their names. You need to know their names. You know, in the Holocaust, they tattooed numbers on the Jews' arms. They said, you're not a human being anymore. Now you're just a number. You're a nothing. They degraded them. They broke their spirits as much as they could. And here in the counting, it's almost saying do the opposite. Don't reduce the people into numbers. Make sure they're acknowledged by name. And the commentaries tell us, Nachmanides points this out, the Ramban. He says that they weren't, Moshe, when he called over the heads of the households, he didn't say, how many people in your house? You know, if you do the U.S. Census today, they send you a piece of paper. How many people in your house? You know, you fill out the piece of paper. They don't care who you are, what you are. He didn't do that, the commentary said. He said, bring your whole family to me. And they came. And he said, what's your name? And they gave him the coins. They gave him the coins. He said, as each one came up, and he took a coin from the husband, from the brother, from the whoever it was. Now, again, they were counting from 20 and up. So we're not dealing with the small children and the women right now. But every individual who was counted, when we did have to resort to a count, we made sure to do it in a way that was not degrading but uplifting. And every individual within a family that came was, and the coin was collected from them, was acknowledged by name. What's your name? Oh, Yankel. So beautiful to meet you. Thank you. Takes the coin, puts it in the box. What's your name? Oh, Shmerel. So nice to meet you. Shake his hand, put his coin in the box. What's your name? Philip. Nice to meet you, Philip. Here, let me take your coin. What's your name? James. So nice to meet you. Take your coin, put it. And I'll tell you a story. True story. Just happened actually to me. So I work in a school, as you know. I'm a second grade teacher. If you didn't know, now you know. And so I teach 28 second grade boys, and my co-teacher who teaches their English subjects, I teach the Hebrew subjects, arranged that we would have a trip to the federal courthouse here in Houston, Texas, and we would get to meet one of the federal judges, whose name is Judge Rosenthal, if I'm getting the name right, Rosenthal. It's a very Jewish sounding name because this is a Jewish federal judge. Now, mind you, Judge Rosenthal is not a religious Jew. She's not an Orthodox Jew. She is, I don't know what affiliation, not a person who was raised in Torah observance, but a Jewish person nevertheless. And we had prepared some questions to ask her, and we sent some of the questions ahead. And she opened up in her little talk to us. And she said, you asked me, what does it mean to me to be Jewish and also to be part of the American court system, the United States of America, the Constitution? How does that connect to me as a Jewish person, as a person who is of the people of the book, a person who's of this people who brought a law of fairness, of equality to the world, of goodness, of kindness, of righteousness? What does it mean to me to be a part of that nation and to be appointed as the federal judge in this great nation of the United States? She answered? She said, I have no idea, because I am not studied, she said, in the ways of the Torah as you are, she said to our students. So I cannot answer this question. However, she said, I did consult with a good friend of mine, and she mentioned Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik, who's a great Torah scholar, and she went on to say something that he taught her on the subject when she asked. And what that was, honestly, I don't even remember. But here's what I do remember. After she addressed us and she allowed the students to ask any questions they wanted to, and she was going to say goodbye to us, she got up from her spot at the judge's seat in the courtroom, and we were sitting in the public rows in the back. And she walked over to our row of students, and she came over and she shook hands with every one of my students, and she said, what is your name? And each student told her their name, and she greeted every single one of them by name. To me, that was the most Jewish thing she could have possibly done. And we learn it from this week's Parsha. This wasn't just a class of 28 boys that came to visit. This was a group of 28 individuals, and she showed them that every single one of them mattered. She showed them that she cared to know who each and every one of them was. And it emerges from another beginning in the Torah when we look at the book of Leviticus, which, as we said, starts with the word Vayikra, and he called, and that's significant because God called to Moshe. It's a funny phrase because usually it says God spoke to Moses, God said to Moses. What's the significance of God called to Moses? And this isn't a class on Vayikra, but there in the word Vayikra, it's spelled in a slightly strange way, and that the Aleph at the end of the word Vayikra, this is Leviticus chapter 1, verse 1, the Aleph in a Torah scroll appears small. Usually it's regular size, but in that word it's small. And why? To disguise the word Vayikra, and he called, as the word Vayiker, as though the Aleph isn't there. And the word Vayiker, from the Hebrew word mikra, which means a chance happening, it's instead of and he called to Moshe, would read as and he happened to speak to Moshe. A happening chance meeting has no meaning. If I just happen to speak to you by coincidence, you just happen to be there while I'm talking and you hear me speak, that communication has very little significance, because what that means is I don't care that I'm speaking to you. I don't care that it's you. I don't care who you are. I'm speaking and you happen to be there. There's no connection. There's no relationship. And so we're told that Moses in his humility reduced the size of the Aleph because he didn't want to reveal to the reader the extent of the intimacy between him and the Almighty, that God called to him. When you call to someone, that means I acknowledge you specifically, and as my Rabbi Zachariah Wallerstein said, it means by name, Vayikra, and he called Vayikra Shmo, and he called his name. You call a name, Vayikra, he said, Moses, Moses, Moshe, Moshe. God said, I'm very intentionally speaking to you. I want to acknowledge you as an individual and say, you're the one I want to speak to. Just you, Vayikra el Moshe. He called specifically and intimately to him. And Moshe said, I should write this, God? It's so revealing of a closeness that I don't want an ayin hara. I don't want to be boastful and bragful of our relationship. I want to conceal it. I want to cover it. And so God gave him permission. He said, you cannot delete the letter, but you may reduce the letter. And so he reduced the letter because Vayikra, to call someone by name, is so significant to acknowledge a person as an individual that you are I'm interested in you and I want to have a relationship with you. That's very special and it's very important. And God said, you're going to count them, but you may not reduce them to a number. You may not make this person feel insignificant. So the word for counting is uplift the head. You must make them feel uplifted. You count them by the number of their names. As you take this coin from them, you say, Shalom Aleichem. Hello. How are you? Who are you? What's your name? And one by one, you will greet every single Jew by name, and they will feel, wow, the great Moshe, prophet of God, wanted to know my name. He knows who I am personally. I now have a personal relationship with the great Moshe. What a beautiful feeling of significance that Moshe is commanded to give to each person. I remember when my Rebbe, Rabbi Wallerstein, taught us this. He came into the room to teach us, and we were sitting waiting for him. Of course, we stood up when he walked in, and we sat down. And before he went to the front of the room to speak, he went around the table, and he shook hands with each one of us. And he said, Shalom Aleichem, and he greeted each one of us individually. And if he didn't know us, he asked if it was a new person who came, what's your name? He put this into practice. He taught it, and he put it into practice. And I still remember him going around the table at the beginning of class, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom, how are you? Greeting each one of us individually. So I want to maybe segue to a story. There's a very, very beautiful story. It's in a book called Reflections of the Maggid, M-A-G-G-I-D. A Maggid in Hebrew means someone who tells. A storyteller is called a Maggid. The book is called Reflections of the Maggid, and it's powerful, inspiring stories by an author named, if you can write this down, write it down, Pesach Krohn. Pesach is spelled P-A-Y-S-A-C-H, Pesach, and the last name Krohn, K-R-O-H-N. And Rabbi Pesach Krohn has written a number of books where he records beautiful, inspiring, true stories that he's heard from people all over the world. And he travels the world telling over these very uplifting stories and inspiring audiences the world over. He has many recorded lectures that I suggest you listen to if you want to be inspired. And you should read his books. Now, if you're going to buy his books, and William, I hope you don't mind me promoting myself again. I have a affiliate link for ArtScroll publishers. If you go to artscroll.com, because he publishes through ArtScroll, artscroll.com/Rabbi Rafi, R-E-B-B-I, R-A-F-I, okay? artscroll.com/Rabbi Rafi. That's my affiliate link. You go to the ArtScroll webpage, search up Pesach Krohn or Maggid, M-A-G-G-I-D. Find these books, buy them, and a percentage will go to help support what I do. Just if you're going to buy them, you might as well help me out at the same time.
Exactly. Yep.
More self-promotion. I have a YouTube channel, Rabbi Rafi Mollot, youtube.com/@Rabbi Rafi Mollot, one word. And I just hit 900 subscribers today.
Nicely done. Way to go. Congratulations.
And I want to thank you, William. You know, since we did my shameless self-promotion last time on your channel, I gained many dozen new subscribers. I thank you all for supporting me in that way. But he writes one of the amazing stories that he writes. Before the start, I'll just give another quick introduction. Just the lesson here to take away is, in our life, what's the practical? Treat the people in your life as individuals. What does that mean as individuals? Treat them with significance. Look around for the people in your world who maybe are ignored. There's a book called like The Invisibles or something, and it's about people in our workplace who get no acknowledgement. No one realizes the job that they do, and it interviews them and highlights how essential a part they play in the day-to-day industries and businesses that make our lives run smoothly. You know, like the anesthesiologist in the surgeon's room. Nobody knows the name of the anesthesiologist, but if not for them, everybody would die on the operating table. The anesthesiologist is monitoring their vitals and keeping them alive. So the doctor's doing the cutting, but the anesthesiologist is keeping this guy alive while the doctor cuts away. Nobody knows who that is. There are people in our lives who get overlooked. Look around for people who could use a smile, who could use a hello, how are you, who could use a what's your name? Oh, it's so nice to meet you. Let people feel that they count and that they matter and they have a name and they're not a nothing and they're not a nobody and they're not just a number, if even that. You know and acknowledge them by name and you give them the time of day and you treat them with respect. Let's look for those opportunities to uplift the head, uplift those people. Now, here's the story. The story is that in Argentina is one of the big sources for kosher meat. There's a lot of slaughterhouses there where rabbis go to perform the slaughter in the kosher manner and to inspect the meat to make sure that it's up to kosher standards, and this meat is, packed and sealed and sent to Jewish communities where they can get fresh kosher meat. So Argentina is one of those places where a lot of our meat comes from. And so there was a Jewish shochet. A shochet in Hebrew means a ritual slaughterer, who worked in an Argentinian slaughterhouse, and he would come and go every day. And there was a fellow at the gate. He opened and closed the gate to the slaughterhouse for the employees each day, and his name was Domingo. And every day, this rabbi would come in, and he would say good morning to Domingo. Say, good morning, Domingo. How are you? Every single day when he came. And at night, he would say, Domingo, have a wonderful night. How was your day? Have a great night. And he always greeted him by name when he came and when he left. One day, the owner of the slaughterhouse had locked up, and he was leaving the facility, and he's driving through the gate, and he says, okay, Domingo, that's it, lock up. And Domingo says, no, there's somebody still inside. And he said, no, I was just inside. There's nobody there. Everybody left. And he said, no, there's someone still inside. He says, it's late. I stayed the latest. It's been hours since the last worker left. There's nobody inside. He says, the rabbi is still inside. No, he's not. I looked. He's not there. The rabbi is still inside. Okay, so the owner says, fine, let's go look around. Come with me. So Domingo and the owner, they go and they start checking inside the slaughterhouse, and they look everywhere. They check the dressing room. They check the slaughtering area. They check the truck dock. They check the packing house. They checked everywhere. They couldn't find him. Finally, they went to one of the industrial refrigerators and opened it up. And inside, they found the rabbi huddled up, shivering, trying to stay warm and stay alive. He had been trapped, locked inside of the industrial fridge, probably suffering from hypothermia. Who knows how much time till he would have died from the cold. They found him in there, and they were able to get him medical attention and resuscitate him and to save his life. And the owner said to Domingo, he says, I don't understand. We have hundreds of people coming and going every day into this factory, into this facility. How did you know that one person didn't leave? How could you possibly have known that? He said, you're right. There are hundreds of people who come and go in and out of that gate. He says, most of them never say a word to me. They don't even look at me. To them, I'm nothing. I'm just the guy who opens the gate, if I'm anything at all. The gate opens and closes. That's all they know, and that's all they care about. He says, this rabbi, every single day, he says, good morning, Domingo. How are you? It's good to see you. Have a nice day. And every night when he leaves, he says, how was your day, Domingo? Have a wonderful night. He says, it makes my day and it makes my evening. And I wait each night for the rabbi to leave because I enjoy so much the way he treats me. He says, tonight I didn't get that goodbye, and I was still waiting for it hours later. He said, I knew he hadn't left. I knew he hadn't left. So just imagine how treating a person as an individual, treating a person as a name and not a number, treating a person with significance, not reducing him to some anonymous role, even though How important is the gate guy? Okay, without him, you can't get in and out, but anybody could push the button, right? So he's not there, you get someone else. But in the end of the day, he's much more than his job. He's a human being. He's a Tselem Elokim. He's an image of God. He has a divine soul. Every person you see has a divine soul and a divine spark. Don't they deserve to be treated with dignity? Isn't it almost our obligation to get to know, to the degree that's practical? Obviously, we can't stop every 5 feet and say hello, and every 5 feet and have a conversation. But to the degree that we can, a little bit step up our game of acknowledging the dignity of each person, the divinity of each person, that he's worthy of praise and he's worthy of honor and he's worthy of being loved. How sometimes it'll save their life. It'll scoop them up out of depression. And how many stories have you probably heard of the kid who was bullied and he was going to kill himself, and then on the way home somebody helped him and hung out with him and had a conversation with him, and that day he decided not to kill himself, and he turned his life around and he became successful, and you know what, and later he came to we all hear all these stories and they're true. And later he came to the person and he said, "You saved my life," and the person never even knew it. You don't know the difference you could do, the life you could save by giving someone the time of day, by acknowledging them, by saying hello, by giving them a smile, by asking how they're doing, asking their name, calling them by their name. You could save how many lives every day by doing that? But maybe the life you'll save will be your own. You heard this story, it's a true story. Maybe the life you'll save will be your own. And just to tie it also into Shavuot, which is next week, again, we spoke about the days between Passover and Shavuot, that Jews have a custom of observing mourning over the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva who died during this time. And the Talmud relates that the reason that they met this ill fate was that they didn't treat each other with respect. They didn't treat each other with dignity. When we demoralize a person, when we dehumanize a person, when we treat them without dignity, we endanger their emotional well-being, their psychological well-being, their sense of self, their sense of dignity and self-worth, and we endanger that person. Sadly, how many suicides occur each day because a person says, "My life is not worth living"? So when God says, remember we said in the beginning, God wants to count the Jews because he loves the Jews so much, and he says, "Oh, Jews, I love you." That's not God being narcissistic. The message is for us. The message is to say, wait a second, I count? I matter? God is counting me? God loves me? God cares about me? I'm a somebody in the eyes of God. He knows my name. He's looking after me. He's concerned for me. He cares about me. The message of the counting is also, hey, God wants me to count you. God wants to know about you. That's why it's called the book of Numbers, Pikudim, because Pikudim means a few different things in Hebrew. It means the book of counting. But by the way, I'm going to tell you something so deep, it's going to blow your socks off. The Hebrew word for Pikudim, the Hebrew root, is Pei Kuf Dalet, Pakad. Pakad also means in Hebrew to be missing. And I left out the citation not on purpose, just because of time. But later on in Parshat Pinchas, in the portion of Pinchas, which comes later, the Jews go to war against Midian. And when they come back, the Jews say, Lo nifkad mimenu ish. Not a single man from among us was nifkad, from the same root of pikudim. Nifkad, not a single man went missing. No casualties. No one was lost in the battle. So the word for counting also means to be missing. Why is that? Why is that? Because when you're not there, God is saying there's something missing. The picture is incomplete. The nation is incomplete. The world is incomplete. They quote from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I don't know if he said that, the Rebbe Lubavitch, and I don't know if he's the only one who said it, and I don't know if he's the first one who said it. But they quote from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. They say the day you were born was the day God decided the world could not exist without you. If you are here, God created you. He brought you into the world. He breathed of his essence into you. There's a divine spark within you. There's a piece of God within you. You matter. You're worthy. You count. We spoke about counting the days last week. Counting the days and making the days count. That's the idea here. When God counts you, he says, you count. So when you're counted, you're being told, without you, something's missing. Lo nifkad mimenu ish. No one was missing. Counting, to be missing. To be counted means to be considered, without you, something's missing. You're an integral part of the picture. Every single person is integral. And also the word pakad is the root in Hebrew of the word tafkid. A tafkid means a purpose, a assignment, a mission. Every person is here because he has a purpose. He has a tafkid. He has a mission. Without him, nifkad, something's missing. The world is incomplete. The world cannot come to its completion without you. You are counted. You count. You matter. Without you, something's missing. You have a mission. You have a purpose. You're here for a reason. Tafkid. Su'u et rosh. Uplift the head. The head, the individual, uplift. Let them know they matter by the number of their names. Call them by name. Let them know that they matter. Let them know that they count as an individual. There's maybe a great story that I've told before that I'll close with, which is, to tie it back to Rabbi Akiva and his students, they didn't treat one another with dignity. You don't count. You don't matter. You don't need to be here. Okay? You take away a person's dignity, his reason for being, he doesn't want to be here. You risk causing the person to feel like he doesn't matter and to maybe take himself out of the world, God forbid. These individuals who acted that way were likewise taken out. I'll tell you something. Related to this, my Rebbe, Rav Daniel Belsky, should live with me well, he said an amazing thing. He said, we have a verse, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. We covered this verse some classes ago. You should love your fellow as yourself. L'reacha, your fellow as yourself. Kamocha. So what is the word for your fellow? Reacha. Cha means your. Rea. Rea means your fellow. A fellow. Reacha, your fellow. Rea. You know how that's spelled in Hebrew? Reish ayin. You know what other word is spelled Reish ayin? You know what other word is spelled Reish ayin, William?
Ra, or like
what's that?
Ra.
Ra. And what does Ra mean?
Evil, I thought. Maybe
Evil.
Okay.
So wait a second. You're calling your friend Rea, which is the same spelling as the word Ra, evil. How is the word for evil and the word for Rea, a friend, how is that the same? It's opposite.
Right.
So Rabbi Belsky said this. He said, no, you're misunderstanding. What is Ra? Ra is the absence of good. It's the concealment of good. God, so to speak, is all good. His creation, therefore, should be all good. However, there are pieces missing. There is a concealment of the goodness of God. And so the light of God, so to speak, that we spoke about, the light of God is being blocked. Ra, what we call evil in English, because it's the opposite of good. It's the concealment of what is good. Ra just means what's missing. That which is missing is Ra. So for example, he gave the example in Hebrew, the word Ra'ua, which is from the same root, means something that is shaky or flimsy. If you have a ladder, that's Ra'ua, a shaky ladder, because it's not integrated well. There's gaps, there's spaces between the rungs and the bars. So the ladder's shaky and it's going to crack. It's Ra'ua. So what does that do with being evil? Because there are gaps. It's incomplete. It's incomplete. So when we say Reya about a person, we're saying, you are what's missing from me. In as much as you're separate from me, you are missing from the wholeness that is me. And to be whole, I need to embrace you. Raya means that which is missing. You treat another person. You love him like yourself. You treat another person not like, I could do without you. I could do without you. You don't matter. I don't need you. No, how do you treat him? Raya, without you, I'm incomplete. You're what's missing from me. Just like Ra means what's missing from the world. The Rayas, you're what's missing from me. You're what's missing from me. Nifkad bokad, to count and to be missing. You count, you matter. Without you, something's missing. Tough kid, you have a purpose. Without you, that purpose can't be fulfilled. The world is incomplete. You see how deep, you see how brilliant? So final story, and then we'll stop because I said I would tell a story. I told the story before last year in a different Parsha. I'll tell it again because a lot of your listeners forgot and a lot of your listeners didn't hear that class. This is a story that happened with my own Rebbe, Rabbi Moshe Pluchak, and the story's been told over by Rabbi Pesach Kron, who I mentioned many, many times.
And if you want to see last year's show, just simply go to TaNaCh Talk and type in BaMidbar, and you'll see both shows.
But it's not in that class. This story I told in a different class.
Oh, okay, got it. Sorry.
Not BaMidbar, but I'm gonna work it into this class, which is this. I'll try to tell quick because the hour is late. But like this, my Rebbe, Rabbi Moshe Pluchak, he used to teach. He's a teacher all year round, but in the summers he would teach in a summer camp. And a lot of the people that attended, it was a summer camp, but it was in what's called a bungalow colony. The Jews leave the big cities and they go to upstate New York, where basically you live in like a wooden shack on a little simple wooden home colony, like a camp, like an encampment for the summer months. And it's very quaint. And you do summery things, and there's summer camp activities for the kids, etc. Anyway, there's also learning that goes on every day for the Torah community that engages in learning every day. And of course, one of the teachers was my own Rabbi Moshe Pluchak. And among the people that he studied with was a fellow who was a Baal Teshuvah. He was a returnee to Judaism. He had grown up irreligious, and he had become an observant, Torah-observant Jew. And they were learning together Talmud. They were learning Talmud together. And this Jew, who was already older, probably even older than my Rebbe, he had a very difficult time with the Talmud, with the language. It was very hard for him to read it. It was very hard for him to understand it. And even the logical reasoning in the Talmud is a very difficult one to grasp. It takes a lot of mental energy to master the discipline of Talmudic learning and logic. And he struggled so much that in the middle of his learning, he wanted to quit. And he said to my Rebbe, you know what? I give up on learning Torah. I came into this too late. I can barely read. It's too difficult for me. I don't have time in my life to ever become a master of this. And the truth is, Rabbi, I have to tell you, I have cancer, and my odds are not good. I'm not going to last too many more years on this earth. And what's the point? What's the point? And as my Rebbe is listening to him talk, he's remembering something that happened to him some years earlier, is that he was driving through the mountains on upstate New York and listening to the radio. And there was a radio show on where they were highlighting the biography of a great composer, a conductor rather, a great orchestra conductor named Toscanini. And in the biography of Toscanini, one of the stories they told is that the biographer, who I think was speaking, was interviewing Toscanini for his biography. And as they were sitting together, there was a piece playing on the radio, an orchestral piece. And as the piece is playing, he can see that Toscanini is displeased with what he's hearing. So the biographer asks Toscanini, what's bothering you? He says, this piece is meant to be played with 15 violins, and this orchestra only has 14. And he's listening to the radio, and it's radio quality audio. And he's like, I cannot tell how many violins there are. And Toscanini says, well, I can. I have a trained ear. He says, yeah, but the difference between 14 on a radio recording, you can tell the difference between 14 and 15? He says, yes, I can. And it's not the orchestra, the symphony is not complete. There's a sound missing. It's not meant to sound this way. So the biographer can't believe his eyes. He thinks Toscanini is boasting, he's bragging. So after their meeting, he calls up the radio station and he says, that piece that you were playing, what recording was it? So he says, oh, it's such and such Philharmonic Orchestra this year of the publication. So he calls up the orchestra and he finds out who was the conductor the day of that recording. And he gets in touch with him. This is what a biographer does. He does research. He says, tell me on that recording, how many violins are playing? And the guy says in an almost embarrassing way, he says, the truth is, I have to be honest with you. There was supposed to be 15 violins playing that day. One of our violinists called in sick. We had to record with only 14.
Wow.
The biographer nearly passed out in wonderment at the precision of the ear of Toscanini. So my Rebbe snaps back to the bungalow with his learning partner, this older sick gentleman who's all feeling dejected. And he says to my friend, he says, let me tell you something about the great conductor Toscanini. And he tells him that story. And he says, let me tell you something. If Toscanini can be sensitive that there's one violin missing in a violin section of 15, he says, there's a great conductor in heaven who conducts all affairs on earth. And he's placed every player into his position with exactly the instrument he needs to play the symphony. And he's listening right now. And he wants to hear each player playing his part. Now, if one player will refuse to play his part, if a single violinist missing in an orchestra can displease the ear of a human being, Toscanini, how much is the ear of the great conductor in heaven listening for that pleasing sound of you, my friend, studying his Torah in exactly the way you are able, with exactly the tools that he has given you to complete the symphony. Without you, my friend, the symphony is incomplete and the conductor is waiting to hear his music. And when he said that, this man, he came back alive. He said, really? He's listening to me. I'm a player in his orchestra. He wants to hear my music. My part in this world matters. He says, then what are we waiting for, Moshe? Rabbi Moshe, let's play our music. And with that, they continued learning. And I leave you with this message, my friends. Each and every one of you, you all count. You're part of God's orchestra. Without you, something's missing. You have a purpose to fulfill in this world. You're a spark of a divine, and the day you were born was the day Hashem decided the world is incomplete without you. Realize your own worth. Realize the worth of the person next to you. Realize the worth of the people that you meet throughout the day, and treat everyone with the dignity that they deserve. Treat everyone as a name and not a number. Say hello. Find out people's names. Ask how their day is going. Understand that's what God is doing with you, and understand that's what you're meant to do with others. You are an integral piece in the great orchestra, and so too you must relate to your fellow men. And that is a great lesson that emerges from Parshat BaMidbar. Uplift the head individual, b'mispar shemos, according to the number of their names. You matter, and make sure that you pay it forward and make others feel like they matter as well. That's all from me.
That's a great set. Okay, so before you guys go, I will indulge you in a very, very awesome thing for this Chag coming up, and it's a song called it's the Shavuot song called "Up All Night." You guys are gonna love this. Here we go. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen with Rabbi just so he can see it too.
The 6th of Sivan, it's the day that we receive.
Where's my screen share? Here we go.
Anything you want to learn, it's alright.
Put some water in the urn, stay up all night.
Put on your fedora.
Actually, I can't share my screen. It's on another computer, but you can watch the
Time for
video.
Kabbalas Torah.
Anything you want to wear, it's alright.
Just keep those thumbs in the air. Stay up all night.
Chomesh Chazara.
Mishnah Chazara.
Gemara Chazara,
Yeah!
Eat a melon or a mango when you do the Torah tango.
Priya Adama or 8. That's right.
Got to make it tonight. Stay up all night. Say some prakim up to Hillim. Keep your coffee cup from spilling.
If you're starting to sway, it's alright.
Try our cheesecake buffet.
Stay up all night.
Navi Chazara.
Musar Chazara.
Halacha Chazara, yeah!
So wake up your chevrusas. This is no time for excuses.
Anything to help you focus, it's alright.
Cause there's really no machlokes.
Stay up all night. Hold on to your stander. We can't possibly surrender.
Cause you know it is Shavuos, that's right.
And the only thing to do is
Stay up all night.
Cause you know it is Shavuos, that's right.
And the only thing to do is stay up all night.
Gonna stay up all.
Gonna stay up all. We're gonna stay up all night.
That's a great song. Funny, uplifting, and everything else. Guys, see you next week. Same time, same place. Rabbi had to pull out, so we'll see you on the turnaround. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget, tomorrow night, two guys exploring Christianity, a discussion about did Jesus actually admit to there being only one God. We'll see you soon. Peace.
Shalom, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNachTalk.com. TaNachTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.
אני אתה אתם תמיד תמיד כולם ביחד חשוב מכל חשוב